Well, hello everyone. This is DC with the DC Capstone Report. It is great to be back to talking about another Alabama victory. Yes, it was an Alabama victory over Ole Miss. So I was glad to get that victory. Today in the podcast, we're going to take a look and review in the first segment the game against Ole Miss. We're going to talk about the good and the bad that came out of that game. In our second segment, we're going to talk about our standout players of the game. And in our third segment, we're going to preview the upcoming game against the Georgia Bulldogs. You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is featured each Tuesday morning on the Martin Houston Show at Tide 100.9. You can listen live at Tide100.9.com. Well, it's great to be back on the podcast this week. Another podcast on Alabama football. Coming off of a victory, Alabama's won 3 SEC games in a row. And we go into next week's game against the Georgia Bulldogs as the number 2 ranked team in the nation. This last game against Ole Miss was something to see. I mean, an offensive explosion on both sides of the ball. So let's take a look at it. I've heard a lot of the pundits talk about how bad Alabama's defense was, and I'm not going to sit here today and defend the defense wholeheartedly, but I'm going to show you how that this game was a perfect storm for Alabama to go up against a good team in Ole Miss, coached by a great offensive play caller in Lane Kiffin. Well, Coach Saban definitely said he prepared us for this ahead of time. He said in his press conference last week, leading up to the game, he said in his telephone conference, he spoke about it pregame, that this was going to be a tough matchup for the Alabama defense to go against such a great play caller in Lane Kiffin. And this game was everything we thought it would be on the offensive side of the ball from Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin called a great game. He got them in some great plays, and they just dominated on the offensive side of the ball. Our defense really didn't have an answer for what they were trying to do. Well, where's the question comes in is how can that happen at Alabama? How can the defense not be? And everybody blames Pete Golding. Now, I'm not going to give Pete Golding a pass because I think the blame lies amongst a lot of people. Coach Saban said it best afterwards. He said the defense was unacceptable. They didn't play a good game on any section, in any side of the defensive side, and they were not prepared to play against Ole Miss. And when he said that, he said, and that's my fault. And I do place the most on Coach Saban because this is Coach Saban's defense. And when Coach Saban plays this type of defense, normally it's a good defense and it is really, really stellar in its performances unless we have breakdowns on individuals. But this time I think we have both scheme problems which led to breakdown in individuals, and I'm going to go into that a little bit. So I want to talk about the defensive side of the ball for just a moment. I think we had poor communication. We had poor communication that exhibited itself much like it did last year in this game. I think we had some missed assignments by individuals. I think we had some missed tackles. I think we had some issues of schematic problems in this game. But what I don't think is, I don't think that it is something that happened in this game that we can't correct for games ahead. Many people are concerned about Georgia coming in. I'll tell you, I'm not concerned about Georgia as I was about Ole Miss simply because of the schemes and the offenses that Ole Miss runs. And I think that's what happened. The number one thing that I think is the problem with the Alabama defense in the game against Mississippi can come down to one word, and that is tempo. Alabama could not match the tempo on defense that Ole Miss played on offense. And Lane Kiffin is a master at that. You know, when he came into Alabama, he did a great job of bringing Alabama up to a more tempo-paced offense. Alabama has always had problems with tempo offenses. We've had 2 losses against Ole Miss when Hugh Freeze was coach there because of up-tempo play. We had problems with Ohio State in a Sugar Bowl in a semifinal match with up-tempo play. We had problems in the late drive against Clemson with up-tempo play. And that tempo problem is something that Coach Saban has never been able to correct with his scheme or his defensive scheme in order to be able to match what the offense is doing. So I think that this was a perfect storm. We had the weather that was a contributing factor in the missed tackles with the sloshy footing and the wet jerseys. That was a problem for both sides during the game. And then you have the defensive communications issues which were brought on to even greater heights because of the up-tempo style of the Ole Miss offense. So I don't want to just sit here and bash the Alabama defense, because I don't think you give credit where credit is due when you do that. And I believe you should credit Lane Kiffin with a great offensive plan. He knows Coach Saban's defense because he was there so long. He knows the kind of defense he's going to play. And that hadn't changed much over the years. Now, what Lane Kiffin did was exploit that style of defense with the up-tempo style of offense. That concerns me down the road for teams that we will play that has that kind of up-tempo style and can do it. But I think that Ole Miss did a great job in what they did. When you're reviewing the Ole Miss game, let's give credit where credit's due and say that Coach Kiffin did a good job of preparing the team offensively to play Alabama and to try to get the upper hand by using tempo. Well, what happened in the game is everybody needs to understand Alabama won the game because of their offense and being able to run the ball late in the fourth quarter, and because of their defense getting some stops where it led to field goals. Now, Coach Saban always says that no matter how the defense plays, if it ends in a kick, he will be happy. A punt, or a field goal, or a stop play. So I think what you need to focus on here is Alabama made just enough plays on defense to win this game. But the offense is what won the game for us. The other thing you need to focus on is every championship team that Alabama's has had a game like this where they almost were defeated, but they found a way to pull it out. So I think this will be a great learning experience for our defense, and I think we're going to come out much better for it. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, when you review this Ole Miss game, you have to give them an A+ on the offensive side of the ball. We were hitting on all cylinders. It started with the offensive line. It started there, and it went to the running backs, the quarterback and Mack Jones being able to get us into the right plays, throw the ball when they were giving us the pass, and run the ball when they were giving us the run. And then late in the game, we imposed our will, which we haven't been able to do on a team in a long time, imposed our will up front to run the ball at will. They knew we were going to run the ball, and we ran it right down the field and scored a touchdown. And it was just really good to see our offense perform on all cylinders. The only thing I can say about the offense that was negative was the turnover. The fumble by Najee Harris, the first one ever in his career. There was a little freak play there where he fumbled the ball. Thought maybe his momentum had been stopped and the play had stopped, but you got to play till you hear the whistles. That was a mistake on his part. And the other thing was the inordinate amount of penalties where we shoot ourselves in the foot. There's going to come a time if we keep having those penalties that they will stop a drive. This time we were able to overcome them with some great offensive plays. But I think overall our offense played a great game. It's great to see a shootout like that sometimes. And people say, hey, this is the closest shootout that Alabama's ever had. No, not really. If you were alive like I was back in the day when Archie Manning and Scott Hunter had that great duel at Legion Field, it was the last team that had the ball that would win that game. So you know that that's still out there, the possibility of doing that. So this was a great time to see our team compete, to overcome the adversity of how the defense had played, overcome the turnovers, and be able to go down the field and beat this team and score 63 points with so many yards rushing and so many yards passing. Overall, this was a good offensive performance by Alabama. Yes, not good defensively for all of us that love to see that defensive struggle, but those days of 6-3 games, I think, are behind us now with the changing of the times and the up-tempo offensives that we'll come up against in the future. Well, here in the second segment, we're going to take a look at the standout players of the game. Well, I've just talked about how poor we played on defense. So, as you can imagine, all of my standout players of this game are going to come from the offensive side of the ball. Well, I believe it starts up front. So, what I want to give is a shout-out to every starter on the offensive line and our tight ends that blocked well in this game also. I know they had some penalties, and I know they made some mistakes and blown assignments that cost us some plays. But I really believe that overall, as a big picture on offense, this is one of the best games I've seen our offensive line play that gives good protection for our quarterback and also imposed our will on the other team late in the fourth quarter. And that's the kind of Bama football that we want to see played. So across the board from Alex Leatherwood, our tackle on our tackle, to Deontay Brown at guard, Landon Dickerson at center, Emil Ikior at guard, and Evan Neal at the tackle position. Across the line, they played a really good game. And also, don't forget our tight ends, Miller Forstall and Carl Tucker and Cameron Latu. All those players that came in and had a function in the game where they were just incredible play as far as blocking. And I think they did a great job in this game. So I think it starts with the offensive line. On the offensive side of the ball, we stay over there and we see right behind that offensive line Najee Harris. Najee Harris has a career game, a breakout game. I'm sure it puts him in the running for the Heisman Trophy, the talk for all the Walter Camp Awards and all the other awards out there because of the game that he had. If he can sustain that, if he can build on that against other tough teams along the road, I think you're going to see him in the talk for the Heisman down the road. But Najee Harris ran with reckless abandon. He hit the holes well. The only negative was the fumble that I mentioned earlier in the first segment, and that fumble should have been avoidable. He should have played to the whistle, held on to the ball, and don't let him rip it out. But with the rain and with the stop momentum, you can see how he relaxed a little bit. But that's a mistake that he can correct down the road. I don't think that'll happen again. That was his first fumble ever as an Alabama football player. So Najee Harris is another standout player of the game with the great job he did in all phases of the game. My second standout player of the game on offense is Mack Jones. Mack Jones had a phenomenal game as quarterback. And I know with all the running game that we had and all the offense on display with all the playmakers, we seem to forget that Mack Jones did a great job of getting us in the right plays and making the plays when he had to with his arm. He just did a really good job of putting the ball in tight spaces and tight windows in this game. And being able to run the RPOs, the run-pass options, being able to pull it out and hit those players that are open on the slant. And what that takes is dedication to understand the scheme and the game, to leave that ball in the running back's belly long enough to draw those linebackers up and know when to pull it and hit that slant over the middle. And he did an exceptional job in this game. So I think all facets of this game, Mack Jones did a great job, and he's one of my standout players of the game. Now, the third one is Devonte Smith. Devonte Smith in this game had another great game against the Ole Miss Rebels. It seems like he lights on fire every time he plays the Ole Miss Rebels for some reason. Last year he had a tremendous game, and then another one in this game. Running the ball on the jet sweeps, catching the passes for possession, running routes that left the defensive players in his wake, deep balls. He did a great job in every facet of the offense. And I was just excited to see him have such a great game. So another standout player of the game was Devonte Smith. So you got your offensive line, you got Najee Harris, Mack Jones, and Devonte Smith. And I want to highlight another player here. You know, in this podcast, we try to do something different every now and then to get people's name out there when they make great plays. And I want to highlight a player here, and that player is Josh McMillon. Josh McMillan, who had every knee injury that was just really devastating for him to come back from last year. He comes back and gets a medical red shirt. He gets to come back and play again this year as a linebacker. And he hasn't been able to get on the field as a linebacker, but he gets on the field as the fullback in a short yardage formation. And if you go back and look at that last touchdown run by Najee Harris, Josh McMillan makes the crushing block that takes out the only player that could stop him on that play. A lot of times you see big plays just gashed on these short yardage. So Alabama trying to gain that 1 yard, puts in Josh McMillan at fullback. He makes a perfect fullback move and a fullback block that pancaked his opponent, and Najee Harris springs it for a long touchdown run, his fifth of the game. So I just want to highlight Josh McMillan, the wherewithal for him to come back from rehab, not knowing if he'd get a medical red shirt or not knowing if he'd be able to make it back and play or not. Just the gutsiness of Josh McMillan, I want to highlight here is one of my standout plays of the game for a good and standout player that's come a long way back from his recovery. Well, our third and final segment of the day, we get to talk about the Georgia Bulldogs coming to town. The number 3 Georgia Bulldogs against the number 2 Alabama Crimson Tide at Bryant-Denny Stadium. This has the makings of a late November game for the title on the line in early October because of the new schedule with the all SEC 10-game schedule. We got the Georgia Bulldogs coming to town, ranked number 3 in the nation. And the only thing that's going to be missing is the large crowd that usually packs Bryant-Denny Stadium. And this week, already College Game Day, ESPN's Game Day, has announced they're coming to Bryant-Denny Stadium for Game Day. Well, they won't have the big crowds because of the virus, but I believe the hype is going to be here. This will probably be one of the most hyped games of the year with Game Day here. And there'll be pundits on either side telling you who's going to win this game and how they're going to win this game. Well, if we're going to preview this Georgia game, the first thing, the glaring thing that we've got to talk about is, can this Alabama defense match up against the Georgia Bulldogs, or will they run through us like Ole Miss did on passing and running the ball? Well, in my opinion, the Georgia Bulldogs and Alabama match up so much better. The matchup favors the Alabama defense in this one. Georgia doesn't run much of an up-tempo style. Georgia doesn't have much motion. Georgia relies heavily on the running game to set up their play-action passing game. So I believe that if Georgia goes and tries to do something different outside of their comfort zone, I don't think that bodes well for Georgia. So I believe they will stick pretty close to their game plan of having a great defensive team and having an offense that doesn't get you beat. I think that gives Alabama's defense a really good game to bounce back in. So if we can correct the mental errors individuals had, like not knowing where to line up, not knowing where they're supposed to be, those type of things on defense, if the communication is better, then we have a really good game against the Georgia Bulldogs to bounce back. And no one's going to expect it. There's going to be a lot of people that expect the Georgia Bulldogs just to go through and blow us out. But here we're going to have an opportunity to really show what kind of defensive play we have. I do believe that Coach Saban's defensive scheme matches up well against the Georgia Bulldogs, so I believe we're going to have a good opportunity to bounce back in this game. Well, on defense, Georgia brings in one of the top-rated defense in the nation. They are really good at what they do. They're very physical up front. They cover well. They stop the run well. So it's going to be a test. It's going to be the defense that Georgia has. That defense going to match up well against Alabama. Well, in my opinion, Alabama has one of the most explosive offenses in the nation. You know, I was looking at after that game against Ole Miss, and I was talking to a friend of mine who was an Ole Miss fan, and he said I watched that game with a lot of intensity, and it gave me. He said it gave me just some hope that Ole Miss is on the right track with Lane Kiffin and his offense. He said, but I watched the Alabama team play as well, and I don't think there'll be any other team that'll put up 48 points on you guys this year. And I don't think that will either. I don't think there's going to be a team that'll put up that many points on Alabama again this year simply because of the way the matchup was and the scheme was. So I think Alabama matches up really well on offense against the Georgia Bulldogs. We have playmakers that can make plays. What do we have to do on offense in order to win this game? Number one, we got to limit mistakes. We can't have turnovers. We can't have broken plays on defense. We're going to have to limit those mistakes. And number two, we're going to have to limit penalties. We can't have penalties stop drives. This is the type of a game where penalties can stop drives, and we don't need that in this type of game. We need to be able to have mistake-free football. And number three, which will be the most important thing, and that is we just have to have our offense play within itself. And what I mean by that, Mack Jones has to play this game to have the best game of his career into knowing when to throw the ball, when the defense gives you the pass, and when to run the ball, when the defense gives you the run. We have too many playmakers on offense to spread the ball around to, not to be able to take those throws, those short throws that can turn into large, huge plays, or run the ball even when it seems like we're being stopped until we get that opening to break one. We don't need to be so one-dimensional that we stop running the ball and start passing all the time. We need to have a balanced offense in this game. The way we're going to beat the Georgia Bulldogs is to have a balanced offense, run the ball and pass the ball. pass the ball when they give us the pass, and run the ball when they give us the run. And then in the fourth quarter, we're going to have to impose our will on that great defensive team. We're going to have to worn them down with our offensive line and our backs over the time that in the fourth quarter, we can run that ball at will to take some time off the clock and to score. I think this is going to be a tough game for Alabama. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be a tough game. Can we bounce back defensively, and can we take what Georgia's defense gives us without getting greedy and making mistakes? If we do that, which I think we will, I think this is going to be a big victory for the Alabama Crimson Tide. On a national stage, we're going to have some players like Mack Jones and Najee Harris and some other players in this game that will be able to create value for themselves. It's what Coach Saban said he wanted, the players to be able to play games this year in spite of the virus to create value for themselves. What better stage than number 2 versus number 3 for a national TV audience in prime time with College Game Day here in Bryant-Denny? What better stage for a place where players can take advantage and create value for themselves? I think they do. I think our players step up to the plate. They come out of this game as victory. I think Alabama wins it 31-21. Well, that's all this week for the DC Capstone Report. Thank you for turning in and listening to us each and every day, each and every week. Lance and I really appreciate it. We hope you have a great week, and roll Tide.